James Carter carefully arranged the gifts in his canvas bag, each one wrapped with colorful paper and hand-tied bows. At 78, his fingers didn't cooperate as they once did. Arthritis had seen to that. But some traditions were worth the pain. For 15 years, ever since his wife Martha passed, James had made these Christmas Eve deliveries to the children at Grace Community Church. The mirror reflected a man weathered by time, silver hair cropped in the same military cut he'd worn since Vietnam. His eyes, creased at the corners from squinting in the jungle sun, and his unmistakable ramrod posture, a mark of his Marine training, only reinforced the image of a man who never forgot the discipline drilled into him. He adjusted his veteran's cap and nodded at his reflection. Asterisk. One more Christmas, old man, he murmured to himself, buttoning his coat against the Ohio winter. The snow had been falling since the afternoon, transforming Millfield into a postcard-perfect small town. Christmas lights twinkled through the gentle flurries as James carefully navigated the slippery sidewalks. His children had begged him to move closer to them in Cincinnati, but after 40 years in this town, he couldn't imagine living anywhere else, even if that meant spending most holidays alone. James arrived at Grace Community Church an hour before the children's service was scheduled to begin. He always came early, positioning himself near the entrance where he could surprise each child with a small gift. Nothing extravagant, just puzzles, books, and hand-carved wooden toys he worked on all year. Across the street, Diane Miller, new to the neighborhood, peered through her living room curtains. She didn't recognize James or understand his annual tradition. The sight of a strange man loitering near the church, where her children would soon attend service, triggered immediate concern. She called the police. There's someone suspicious hanging around the church. An older man with a large bag. He's been standing there for 15 minutes now, just watching. Officer Ryan Miller, fresh off a 2-year stint in Columbus, pulled up to the church, lights flashing but sirens off. His supervisor had left early to join his family, leaving Miller as the senior officer on duty. He spotted James immediately. Elderly, yes, but still standing tall despite the cold, a large bag at his feet. Without waiting to observe further, Miller approached with his hand resting on his holster. "Sir, I need you to step away from the building," Miller called out. James turned, confusion written across his face. "Is something wrong, officer?" he asked. "We received a report of suspicious activity. What's in the bag?" Miller's tone was clipped and authoritative. "Just gifts for the children," James said. "I do this every Christmas Eve. Pastor Mike can verify." "I need you to put your hands where I can see them," Miller interrupted, already reaching for his handcuffs. "Step away from the bag, son." "There's a misunderstanding," James said, his voice steady but concerned. "I'm James Carter. I've lived here 40 years. I was just waiting for—" "Hands behind your back now," Miller demanded, his patience evaporating. "I served this country," James protested as Miller grabbed his wrist. 3 tours in Vietnam. "You can't—" The officer spun the elderly veteran around, forcing his wrist into handcuffs, despite James's wincing from the pressure on his arthritic joints. A small crowd of arriving churchgoers gathered, watching in shocked silence as Miller pushed James toward the patrol car. "Please," James said, his dignity straining under the humiliation. "At least let someone deliver the gifts." Miller ignored him, opening the car door. "You have the right to remain silent," he muttered. No one stood up for the old man, but the camera recorded everything. What happens when those sworn to protect become the ones we need protection from? The holding cell at Millfield Police Station was cold. Not deliberately so, but the heating system struggled against the Christmas Eve blizzard howling outside. James Carter sat alone on the bench. The handcuffs had been removed, but his dignity still felt shackled. The thin blanket provided little warmth against the chill that seemed to penetrate his bones. "You get one phone call," the desk sergeant had told him, barely looking up from the holiday movie playing on his computer. James had no one to call. His son David was on a Caribbean cruise with his family. His daughter Catherine lived in Seattle, pregnant with twins. So he declined the call and settled into the silence he had grown accustomed to since Martha's passing. Officer Miller completed his paperwork with efficiency, if not accuracy. Suspicious behavior, resisting instructions, potential threat to public safety. No mention of James's military service, his explanation, or the children's gifts now sitting in the evidence room. Miller clocked out at 11:30 p.m., heading home to his family's Christmas celebration, satisfied with his work. Local reporter Sophia Chen, working the holiday desk at the Millfield Gazette, noticed the police blotter update about an elderly man arrested on Christmas Eve. Something didn't add up. Millfield had a population of just 8,000, and violent crime was virtually non-existent. What elderly man would be arrested on Christmas Eve? By 7 a.m. on Christmas morning, Sophia had filed a Freedom of Information request for Officer Miller's body camera footage. To her surprise, the weekend clerk processed it immediately, and by noon, Sophia sat in the Gazette's empty office, watching the footage with growing disbelief. The video showed James Carter, polite, confused, explaining his presence clearly. It showed Miller's immediate aggression, his refusal to listen, his unnecessary force against an elderly veteran who offered no resistance. Most damning of all, it captured the moment James's shoulder audibly cracked as Miller forced his arms behind his back. The veteran's dignified refusal to cry out in pain was heartbreaking. Within an hour, edited highlights of the footage were uploaded to the Gazette's website under the headline, *Christmas Injustice. Veteran arrested while delivering children's gifts. The story exploded. Local residents recognized James immediately, the kind-hearted veteran who carved toys for children, volunteered at the VFW, and placed flags on graves every Memorial Day. By mid-afternoon, the church parking lot had filled with protesters, despite the holiday. James, meanwhile, had been released without charges. At 10 a.m., when the regular desk sergeant came on duty and recognized him immediately, James walked home in silence. The pain in his shoulder was a constant reminder of the night's indignities. By early evening, the story had reached national news outlets. Veterans organizations issued scathing statements. The hashtag #JusticeForJames trended across social media platforms. Phone lines at the Millfield Police Department jammed with calls demanding accountability. Chief Robert Thompson's Christmas dinner with his family was interrupted by increasingly urgent messages from the mayor, city council members, and finally the state attorney general's office. When he finally viewed the body cam footage, his face drained of color. 27 years on the force, he murmured to his wife. I've never seen anything like this. Asterisk. Sometimes, justice needs a camera to be seen. What happens when technology reveals the truth that power tries to hide? If you believe in holding everyone accountable, regardless of their position, type *truth*. The press conference room at Millfield City Hall had never been so crowded. Local reporters stood shoulder to shoulder with crews from national networks, all drawn by the story of an elderly veteran handcuffed in the snow on Christmas Eve. Camera flashes illuminated Chief Thompson's ashen face as he approached the podium at precisely 10 a.m. on December 26th. Good morning, he began, his voice steady despite his evident distress. I'm here today to address an incident that occurred on Christmas Eve involving Mr. James Carter, a respected veteran and longtime resident of our community. Thompson cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses that couldn't hide his reddened eyes. After reviewing the body camera footage and speaking with all parties involved, I must acknowledge that Mr. Carter was treated in a manner inconsistent with both our departmental values and basic human dignity. The room fell silent as Thompson continued, each word measured and deliberate. The officer involved has been placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. More importantly, I have personally apologized to Mr. Carter for the pain, both physical and emotional, that he endured while in our custody. Will Officer Miller face charges for the injury to Mr. Carter's shoulder? A reporter called out. Thompson nodded gravely. That determination will be made by the county prosecutor's office, which now has all relevant evidence. What I can tell you is that this incident represents a failure of leadership. My leadership. Effective immediately, I am resigning as chief of police. The announcement sent shockwaves through the room. Thompson had been chief for 11 years, guiding the department through budget cuts and modernization efforts with steady confidence. A department reflects its leadership, Thompson continued, raising his hand to quiet the eruption of questions. I failed to properly train and supervise my officers. I failed to create a culture where compassion balances authority. Most of all, I failed Miss Carter, who deserved our protection, not our persecution. Across town, in the small chapel of Millfield General Hospital, James Carter sat quietly as the doctor examined his injured shoulder. The diagnosis was concerning: a torn rotator cuff requiring surgery, followed by months of physical therapy. A nurse appeared in the doorway. There are some people here to see you. James looked up to find the chapel suddenly filled with familiar faces: church members, neighbors, fellow veterans. Pastor Mike stepped forward, his expression solemn. James, we're here to let you know you're not alone in this. We've established the James Carter Veteran Support Fund. It's already raised enough to cover your medical expenses and lost income during recovery. A younger man in a Marine Corps sweatshirt spoke next. Sir, I'm Alex Reyes, commander of the local VFW post. We've arranged for volunteers to cover your home care needs and transportation to all medical appointments. James blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. After years of quiet service to others, he found himself unaccustomed to receiving help. Later that afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived at James's hospital room. Diane Miller, the neighbor whose call had initiated the Christmas Eve incident, stood tentatively at the door. Mr. Carter, she began, I needed to apologize in person. I'm new to town, and I didn't know about your tradition with the children. I was worried about my kids, but I never imagined my call would lead to this. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. Chief Thompson, now former Chief Thompson, stood in the doorway holding James's canvas bag. I thought you might want these delivered as intended, he said quietly, placing the bag beside James's bed, even if they are a day late. One wrong action can destroy a career, but courage and truth will always prevail. In a world where public trust is fragile, who will you choose to be when facing your own moment of reckoning? Spring came to Millfield with the promise of renewal. The snow that had witnessed James Carter's humiliation melted away, revealing crocuses in the church gardens and fresh grass in the town square. The community's healing mirrored nature's rebirth, gradual, tentative, but undeniable. The police department underwent its own transformation under interim chief Diana Ortiz, a 20-year veteran selected for her community-focused approach. Her first official act established mandatory training programs addressing interactions with elderly residents and veterans. Officers now participated in monthly community service alongside those they were sworn to protect, building relationships before crises could occur. Officer Miller, after completing sensitivity training and community service at the local VA hospital, transferred to administrative duties. His choice to stay and face his mistakes, rather than leave town, earned him grudging respect, even from his harshest critics. James Carter's shoulder healed slowly, though he never regained full mobility. By Easter, he was back in his workshop, adapting his wood-carving techniques to accommodate his limitations. The toys he created now featured a small stamp, BTC, Bridge the Community. It was a reference to the foundation established in his name, the James Carter Veteran Service Scholarship, which awarded its first grants that spring, providing education funds for children of veterans pursuing public service careers, funded entirely by community donations. The scholarship embodied Millfield's commitment to transforming a moment of injustice into lasting positive change. On Memorial Day, as flags fluttered over veterans' graves, James stood beside former Chief Thompson at the cemetery's entrance. Without words, they handed fresh flags to visitors. Two men whose lives had collided through circumstance, now united in service and understanding. Different uniforms, James remarked quietly. Same oath to protect what matters. Thompson nodded. The hardest battles are the ones we fight with ourselves. No one should face injustice, especially those who sacrifice for their country. Always stand for truth and justice, even when it requires acknowledging our own mistakes. When I first heard about Mr. Carter's story, Thompson added, I thought of my grandfather, a World War II veteran who always emphasized dignity and respect. Seeing Mr. Carter's resilience reminded me that the fight for justice never ends. It's a reminder that we must always stand up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Let this story inspire us to be better, to listen more, and to act with compassion. Asterisk. I served this country, the elderly man shouted as he was handcuffed in front of the crowd. The officer didn't care, forcing him down into the cold snow on Christmas Eve. 24 hours later, the body cam footage was released. The entire police department was shaken. What was in that video that made the chief of police resign immediately? Asterisk type 1, if you've ever seen good people treated unfairly.